Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. The old principle that a crisis is also an opportunity was validated last month when Israel learned that its citizens were actively being targeted by Iranian hit squads in the city of Istanbul. Close cooperation between Mossad and the Turkish intelligence agency, MIT, managed to foil several plots and bring about the arrest of perpetrators, either Iranian or foreign contract killers. Israeli leaders highlighted the role of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in overseeing the joint operation as a backdrop to a declared wish to upgrade diplomatic relations to an ambassadorial level. To deliberate the seemingly warming of relations between Ankara and Jerusalem, all the way from Istanbul, Turkey, is Mr. Yusuf Erim, who is TRT World Editor-at-Large. Thank you for joining us, Yusuf.
Thanks for having me.
As always, a pleasure. Also joining us from Central Israel is Dr. Eytan Cohen Yanarocak, who is a research fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, as well as the Moshe Dayan Center at Tel Aviv University. Thank you for joining us as well, Eytan.
Thank you.
Also joining us here in the studio is our TV7 editor-at-large, host of TV7 Watchmen Talk, Powers in Play, and so much more, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, give us a broader outlook at the current state of play and all that relates to Israel and Turkey.
So no self-respecting country, and all countries are, obviously, tolerates the phenomenon of outsiders running around its major cities, looking for a hit on third parties. Jordan didn't like it when Israelis were trying to kill Khalid Mashal 25 years ago.
Hamas leader.
In Amman, yes. And obviously Turkey didn't like it when Saudis killed Adnan Khashoggi inside his own, Jamal Khashoggi, inside his own consulate in Istanbul. And now when the Israeli services and the Turkish one cooperated in foiling these attacks, it so happened that it coincides with the warming in relations which President Erdogan generated exactly a year ago. It was in late June of 2021, a week or so after the Bennett-Lapid government came to power, that Erdogan, seeing the changed strategic landscape, decided to upgrade relations, whether first of all behind the scenes and then in diplomacy. He turned indirectly to the foreign ministry headed by Lapid. And when he was not given a warm welcome he went to President Herzog. And the rest is a very, very short and updated history.
Indeed. Mr. Erim, I'd like to hear your take on this.
Well, first of all, I think it's very important to understand what was targeted by these planned Iranian terror attacks. This was not just a so-called retaliation to allegations of Israel hitting Iranian officials. I think that the number one target of these foiled plots were the rapprochement process. And what Iran had hoped, or at least by design, was to derail this process, probably did more to bring these two countries together than anything else that could have happened. Because up till now, the process was mainly led by Israeli President Isaac Herzog. And while there was one meeting between Cavusoglu and Lapid, the top diplomats, having Yair Lapid come to Turkey during this time while Israeli citizens are being threatened, during a time while there is domestic uncertainty in Israel with an election upcoming, shows a great vote of confidence in the rapprochement process and shows ownership of the rapprochement process by the government, not just the ceremonial president. So a very, very strong message to the Turks, a very strong message to the Iranians as well, a very strong message to the region with Yair Lapid's visit. So it was tremendously important to see this happen. It was also very important to see the level of intelligence sharing and working together of the Middle East's two premier intelligence services, Mossad and MIT. So seeing that type of relationship come back on track is also very important as well, and will have a very important positive impact, not just in Turkey and Israel, but also have a positive impact in Iraq, in Syria, and in the wider region throughout the Middle East.
Dr. Cohen, Yanarocak, your take?
I think we should congratulate the Iranians for pushing Israelis and Turkey and the Turkish authorities forward. For a decade, we did not see such a cooperation between the two intelligence agencies. And now, thanks to the Iranian threat, we are seeing that both of the agencies are working together, collaborating together. And two of the leaders that we are seeing, Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu and Foreign Minister Lapid, they also sees this as an important opportunity to take the reconciliation one step further. I think these kind of political summits are crucial for trust building measures between the two countries. I really believe that this was a crucial exam for the future of the bilateral relations. If in retrospect we can say that since the declaration of the normalization, we experienced two important exams. These were the Ramadan and, of course, this recent Iranian threat in Turkey. If we're gonna see this trend, if this trend will survive, I think Israelis and their Turkish counterparts, we can open here a new era in the relations, which can also pave the way for more ambitious projects in the future.
Mr. Owen?
First of all, the Iranians, since the Islamic Revolution, perhaps also before under the Shah, but especially after the revolution, have been running around trying to kill their own dissidents and defectors and others, such as the Saudi ambassador to Washington and former Iranian Prime Minister Shapur Bakhtiar in France. And it is an important milestone in the fight against them that the Turkish authorities managed to get their hands on this squad, and perhaps much like the Khashoggi squad, trace back the responsible and accountable authorities in this case in Tehran. In the other case, it was Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Now, right now, the NATO summit has just ended at Madrid, the last 2 days of June. And obviously, in the run-up to this summit, many Western leaders, up to Secretary of State Blinken, have tried to influence their Turkish counterparts to help NATO unite against Russia, especially in the accession of Sweden and Finland to NATO. And there was an openness by Turkey to this idea and to the entire problem of Russia overextending its power. So one should see the Turkish-Israeli rapprochement as part of a broader movement by Turkey to reintegrate into the Western defense architecture. And of course, we remember that in the 1950s, when there was CENTO, the Central Treaty Organization, the so-called Baghdad Pact, Turkey, along with Iraq and Pakistan and Great Britain, was a member.
Indeed. Mr. Erim, I'd like to hear, just recently there was a meeting in Nur Sultan again, what used to be the Astana summit or Astana talks with regard to Syria in particular, where Turkey serves as one of the three guarantors alongside Iran and Russia. It seems like these cooperation, coordination, or however you want to call it, are not yielding the results which they have in the past, and it seems that Turkey is vying for more of a inclusive understanding, if you will, from its Western partners rather than its Eastern partners. How do you see this draw in Israel, which also has its own interests, of course, in keeping the Islamic Republic at bay?
Well, when we look at what's going on in Syria now that the active fighting has really died down, and we're having a bottleneck with the political solution process. An actor like Iran that has disruptive Shiite militia all throughout the region, especially throughout the Syrian battlefield, sometimes peace might not be exactly what they want. The chaos situation has always been a big bonus for Iran, an area where they can grab power, they can consolidate power. And during this time of peace, we've seen Russia become more and more prominent. We've seen Turkey become more and more prominent. And I think that's something that's bothered the Iranians, seeing their near-decade investment slowly going down. Now, recently we've seen, I believe about a year ago, Turkey even entertained having a trilateral between Russia, Turkey, and Qatar on Syria. So Turkey has already entertained taking Iran out of the Syria equation when possible. So as Turkey is looking more to Western partners to move forward, Israel, the country that has influence and that can change realities on the ground in Syria, could definitely be a viable option to have more diplomacy regarding Syria, because at the end of the day, the security threat perception between Israel and Turkey on the topic of Syria is very, very aligned. Both do not like Bashar al-Assad, both see Shiite militia as very, very disruptive. And while Israel hasn't made too many comments on Russia, I'm sure they're not very, very comfortable having Russian presence so close to its own border. What is acceptable today can cause serious national security concerns for them tomorrow. So when you have a superpower with a presence very close to your border, I'm sure that's a situation that's uncomfortable. Now, as for the Iranians, there were supposed to be two meetings previous between top diplomats of Iran and Turkey. Both of them were postponed. During that process, Turkey ended up meeting with the Israeli foreign minister, ended up meeting with the Saudi crown prince, and now only this past Monday has the Iranian top diplomat come to Turkey to meet with his Turkish counterpart. So there was definitely something going on. There's definitely friction. We can see it, because at a time when Turkey is talking about another Syria operation, at a time when the JCPOAs almost could be back in play, at a time when there's a massive war in Ukraine, one would not expect the Iranian top diplomat to put off two visits to Ankara, a very important actor in the region. So I think there was a lot more to these postponements in the background than meets the eye.
Dr. Cohen, Yanarocak?
When looking from the Turkish perspective, I see that Turkey and Iran are confronting each other, not only within Turkey, that the Turkish intelligence agency foiled these terrorist attacks against the Israeli tourists, but we are also seeing this friction in northern Iraq next to the Sinjar Mountains, where the Shiite militias of Hashd Shaabi are launching missile attacks against the Turkish soldiers, which happened to kill one Turkish soldier in the Turkish Bashika military base in northern Iraq. Besides that, recently Mr. Erdogan also declared his intention of launching another important military campaign in Syria in the Manbij and Tel Rifat enclaves. And of course, from the Iranian perspective, this is again a Turkish penetration into the Shiite Iranian controlled zones. And of course, when we already mentioned the word penetration, we cannot ignore the Turkish penetration in the Nagorno-Karabakh in favor of Azerbaijan, which also weakened Iranians significantly in the region. So when we are looking at this full big picture from the Iranian perspective, I think Tehran, I think they feel very much challenged by the Turks. And I assume that these three important topics will also dominate the summit between the Turkish and the Iranian foreign ministers. But we should also underline another important fact that nobody is talking. It's about the water question between the two countries. Turkey is willing to build two important dams on the Tigris and the Aras rivers, and Iranians are very much anxious that this will decrease the amount of water which will come to Iran, and this will create a huge headache. Again, water will become a very important factor in the decision-making process in the Middle East.
Indeed. Mr.
Well,
Owen?
geography is destiny. And the common interest of Turkey and Israel is to keep Syria away from exercising its power against either of them. Now, obviously, Turkey has a focus on its southern border, which is northern Syria. Also, Turkey long ago took over the province of Hatay or Alexandretta, and Israel, in a symmetrical fashion, took over the southern Syrian province of Golan, and Israel has its focus on its own northern border, which is southern Syria. Of course, in addition, Turkey borders Iran and Iraq, and this is also important to Israel. So after 20 years exactly of Erdogan's rule, it seems as if the traditional strategic alignment between Israeli interests and Turkish ones is coming back.
Mr. Erim?
Yeah, definitely. The alignment is coming back, and it's not just coming back from a national security perspective or an intelligence sharing perspective. During the press conference between Yair Lapid and Mevlut Cavusoglu, they also stressed that the trade ministries will be meeting, their delegations will be meeting July 4th. So also both top diplomats stressed more cooperation, continued dialogue on trade and energy. So we're seeing a wide smorgasbord of topics that Turkey and Israel see they can cooperate on beyond the classic security-centric cooperation. And trade, very, very important. Energy could be a game changer with the pipeline. Again, tourism, the Israeli foreign minister talked about having direct flights for Israeli airlines to Istanbul and the Turkish coast. And this type of safety nets inside the relationship by expanding the areas of bilateral interest are going to be important mechanisms going forward. Now, probably the most important announcement during the press conference was the joint decision to increase representation, or at least launch a process to increase representation at the diplomatic missions to ambassadorial level. And I think the timing was tremendously important because a possible October election and a return of Netanyahu or another political leader that may not be very warm to Turkey can signal a block in the next step of the rapprochement process. So to be able to have ambassadors grandfathered in before any prospective or potential change is very, very important, because I wouldn't foresee any leader coming in and removing ambassadors without having a reason. They would live with that new reality, and that would allow time for the rapprochement to continue at least stay in its place, which would also be a positive, rather than go back or be postponed for another 3, 4, 5 years.
Indeed. Dr. Cohen, Yanarocak?
I think the upgrading of the relations to the ambassadorial level is something beyond the Turkish-Israeli relations. I think this is something very much related with the Abraham Accords axis. We all happen to see the Turkish charm offensive started when the United Arab Emirates President Mohammed bin Zayed visited Turkey. And only after that, we began to see the Turkish reconciliation project that, they began to conduct its rapprochement first to Israel, then to Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and even to Egypt. And I think even if former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will come back, I think this is, since this is something related with a bigger plan and bigger grand strategy, I don't think that he will be an opposing force for upgrading the relations to the ambassadorial level.
Indeed. Well, I'd like to bring Russia into this mix, because also what Mr. Erim mentioned earlier, mid-June for that matter, Ambassador Lavrov visited Ankara. He met with Minister Cavusoglu, during which Mr. Lavrov highlighted his objection to the Turkish operation in Syria, something that has put a certain stop on Turkish plans, which seemed quite imminent at the time. Is this a calculation that also brings into the mix the Israeli-Turkish understanding and also rapprochement to a certain degree?
Not really. Turkey, of course, or Turkey, right, as President Erdogan has insisted that all of us now call the country.
Which happens also to be in Hebrew, those way.
Yes, that's true. With a slight accent, Turkiya rather than Turkey, it doesn't matter. Must have the Russian policy at the back of their mind always. But I think that what is more important, or at least immediate right now, is what is happening in the Iran nuclear agreement talks in Vienna. There must be a connection between the renewal of these talks, which have been dormant for a while, and the Israeli political crisis. Because President Biden has been reluctant to do anything which will make the Biden government fall apart. The Bennett government. Bennett and Lapid were fearful that Benjamin Netanyahu will accuse them of giving up Israeli sovereignty and freedom of movement to American pressure. So they echoed Netanyahu's policy, even though many people in the Israeli national security mechanism are objecting to that policy and are for an agreement. Now that the Bennett government has essentially fallen, Biden is free of this consideration. He can do whatever he wants to do. He can come to Israel and give the Palestinians their consulate general back in East Jerusalem, another topic that Bennett has objected to, because now it's immaterial. And one sees both Turkey and other regional actors starting to act as if the nuclear deal is probably coming back.
Indeed. Mr. Erim?
Yeah, definitely. When we look at Turkey's comments regarding the Iran nuclear deal, while Turkey is categorically against countries getting sanctioned, and they want to see sanctions lifted, I can't in any which way, shape, or form see the national security establishment in Ankara ever being comfortable with Iran obtaining nuclear weapons. Now, many people always view Iran obtaining nuclear weapons with Israel being the number one target, but Turkey shares a 534-kilometer border with Iran, and it only takes about 5 to 6 minutes to have those nuclear warheads aimed at Turkey. And having a neighbor obtain nuclear weapons, all that's going to do is trigger a Middle Eastern nuclear arms race, and that's the last thing the Middle East needs right now. We don't need Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and other countries in the region trying to all obtain nuclear weapons at the same time. This should be a time of regional convergence, and we're seeing this now. Mr. Yanarocak talked about the Abraham Accords. I think that the Turkey and reconciliation with the region, whether it be UAE or Israel, it goes a little earlier than that, back to the Alula summit. I think that's where the seeds were placed, and that was the first part where the two polar camps actually broke, and we saw that ice break with the Qatar blockade ending, which opened the door for Turkey to begin engaging the UAE, Turkey to begin engaging Saudi Arabia and Egypt. So I think that was the huge initial momentum that started this grand convergence in the region. And again, with the Aramco attack, with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, all of this at play, we're seeing many actors all viewing the same thing, all reaching the same conclusion, saying, hey, we need to start having relations with our neighbors because we're going to have to make solutions, local solutions for local problems. And I think that's the driving force behind it. So labeling this Abraham Accords or labeling it this or that, I think that is just packaging it, making it easier and understandable. But it's something much bigger than just one country's reconciliation process. This is a regional understanding.
Dr. Cohen, Yanarocak?
Well, I would like to refer to this Turkish nuclear program as Iran already launched its nuclear program. I think it will create a domino effect in the region. And I will not be surprised if Turkey in the future will also launch its militaristic nuclear program as well. We all happen to see today that Turkey is now constructing its nuclear reactor together with Russia. The first one is located in Mersin, Akkuyu, and the second one will be mostly, it will be in Sinop, and the third one in the Greek border, Ineada. I think when we are looking at the Middle East, unless Iran will withdraw from its nuclear program, I think this domino effect will come, and we're going to see such a scenario in Turkey. I assume that Turks would not like to see a nuclear Iran, but I also would like to remind that Turkey and Iran, they never fought since 1639 a conventional warfare from Kasr-e-Şirin or Zuhab Treaty. So I don't think that the Turkish decision makers see Iran as an existential threat, but they would like to. If one day they will take such an act, they will take such an act in order to meet with this rivalry with Iran.
Mr. Oren?
There is hardly any bilateral relationship anymore. It's all multilateral, regional, and there are several Nobel Peace Prizes available for picking up if the Turkish-Greek conflict is solved, if the Israeli-Palestinian, Israeli-Syrian, Israeli-Iranian ones. There's still a lot of time for diplomats to work on that. It's not going to happen this year.
Well, this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank Mr. Erim, Dr. Cohen, Yanarocak, and Mr. Oren for being part of today's program. And I'd like to thank our viewers as well, and we will see you next time.